Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. This is your host, Howard Fox. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration and enjoyment of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Richard Bangs. Richard is an outdoor enthusiast, co-founder and chief adventure officer of Steller, the app that connects travelers with cool new places and experiences. Get this, the New York Times calls Richard the father of modern adventure travel, and Explorers Web recently named him one of the 100 great explorers of the last 100 years. Richard, it is a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast.
It's great to be here, Howard. So I admire what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And as I was preparing for this podcast, I have to admit to you, sir, I am just a little intimidated. And I know you are a great guy, nice guy. We've been communicating back and forth, but just the adventures you have been on. And it's like, I literally think I could have spent 40 minutes just reading the bio and all the great things and wonderful things you've done, but we're going to make it simple today. We can always come back for another episode. But
okay.
Richard, could you share just a little bit about your background? Let's kind of paint a picture for our audience, how you got into this outdoor adventure space.
Well, okay. That dials back a bit. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, Bethesda. My father was a career officer at the CIA, which was, originally in Foggy Bottom, and then moved to the other side of the Potomac in Virginia. And my father was part of a group that would canoe across the Potomac to work at the CIA headquarters.
Wow.
And I enthusiastically sort of took up this sport and started to canoe up and down the eastern seaboard. And they're just a spate of spectacular rivers that cascade off the Shenandoahs, the Appalachians, the Blue Ridge Mountains. And so I spent a lot of my time doing that and being thrilled by the experiences that come from running rivers. And then I went to one of the meetings, the Canoe Cruisers Association meeting, and a group of them had just returned from the first open canoe descent of the Colorado River to the Grand Canyon. I didn't go. I couldn't afford to go back then. I was in high school still, but they showed the images of this river that was just beyond anything I had ever imagined from spending time in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and such. I thought this is outrageous. This how could this possibly even exist? It looked Spielbergian in its in its wowness. So I sat down and I wrote a letter to the outfitter, a guy named Ted Hatch, who had a company called Hatch River Expeditions in the Colorado. And I noticed that many of the rivers that he ran in the West, the Green River, the Yampa, the Salmon, had equivalencies in the East Coast. So I wrote this letter and I didn't reveal much except that I had been down the Salmon River and the Green River, et cetera, but I've been down the East Coast equivalent. I didn't share that. And he immediately wrote back and hired me to come out and be a guide on the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. By this point, I was a freshman in college. I was 18. And I spent my summers for the next few years guiding, which was a relatively new activity back then, the Colorado through the Grand Canyon. And I heard some stories from Hatch's brother, co-owner, about the first descent of the Indus River in Pakistan that Lowell Thomas had conducted to make a film for an emerging cinematic technology called Cinerama, with these three giant cameras where you would have sort of this wraparound effect in the theater and be immersed in the experience. And they had decided they wanted to do a film on the quest for paradise, Shangri-La, and Pakistan was the place to do it. So they took Don Hatch as the outfitter, and they had lots of adventures, including a capsize at the very beginning of the exercise in which the lead actor in this film drowned.
Oh, wow.
So it was a tragedy, but they finished the film. It was released. I don't think it did that well, except it wowed people because of the technology and the immersive nature. But when I heard that story, I thought I would love to see the Indus River in Pakistan and see if I could do it, because I at that point was a practiced guide of the Colorado, and I thought I was a pretty good one. And the mistakes that have been made in the Indus in Pakistan, I thought I could do. And at the same time, my close high school friend, his father was the vice ambassador, the DCM, to Ethiopia. And he had spent time there and flown over some of the rivers there that spill off the Abyssinian Plateau. And they were spectacular. So I got together with him and I said, why don't we take this concept of river exploration overseas? And he said, yeah. So we started SOBEC, and we started running first descents of rivers all over the world. So,
oh my God. That is amazing. And to think it all started by just, you kind of leaned in there to send the letter, and then everything just kind of grew with that.
It grew out of there. Yeah. So
I'm curious, what did you study in school?
So I was an English major in undergraduate. I went to graduate school. I was at Northwestern undergraduate. And then I got a master's in journalism. And I think one of the reasons that SOBEC as an organization found some traction, one was because it was doing pretty unique and somewhat extraordinary things that nobody else was considering or doing. But secondly, I felt that I had some talent and passion and had learned some of the techniques to report on what we did. So I kept extensive journals on everything that we did, and then would write it up afterwards and send it around. And it was not difficult to find publishers back then, particularly since this was so out there, what we were doing. So I found myself at an early age getting published fairly widely. And then I was approached by Sierra Club Books to write a book. And I did. It was called River Gods. It was my first major book. And that started a sort of an alternative career in not only many articles over the years, but also a number of books. I've published 19 books at this point. So I would say it's less about talent, although there's some of that there, than it is about doing things that are quite remarkable, that have a storytelling structure to them. People want to learn and observe and be inspired and maybe be frightened and be entertained, but they enjoy.
I love it. And there's two questions that come to me. One is the articles that you were writing. I grew up in the age of Life magazine, and then eventually Newsweek. So National Geographic. I mean, garages everywhere in the Midwest had stacks of.
Me too.
Where and I'm assuming some of your articles in photography, journalism focused pieces showed up there. In addition, where else were your pieces being published?
Outside, Esquire, New York Times. I mean, you name a publication that has some aspect of travel or adventure in it, and the likelihood is reasonable that I've had a piece or two or more there. So yeah, that's been a passion. I love the idea of experiencing something that's profound and sort of turns your axis of perception in new ways, and then coming back and sitting down and trying to make sense of it all by writing it down and interpreting it and trying to turn it into something that has not only depth but also meaning. That's a really wonderful exercise. You almost get to live these little ribbons of adventure at least twice when you take that exercise on.
I love that.
So yeah.
When you were describing this ideal, just perhaps presence of being able to experience these adventures, and as I was reading the list of the 100 great explorers in the last 100 years, I mean, some of those folks, I mean, the you know, the Nile, the Amazon, Ethiopia, the things that you were doing, Mount Everest, a lot of cases, folks were leading the way on these adventures and they never knew what they were getting into. And you, having been a part of that for 30 some years, I'm curious today, 2022, is it still possible to have those kinds of life-changing experiences from your perspective?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there are a couple of ways to look at this. One is that every individual has his own sort of barometer, yardstick, however, whatever measurement you want to use, of comfort to risk to to fear, and it's really only if you're willing to step out of the comfort zone and turn some unknown corners in your own cosmology that you begin to learn new things, get new understanding, and I think evolve your consciousness. And also, there's sort of a thrilling spiritual aspect to that notion of trying to stretch yourself into unknown and unfamiliar spaces. There's always danger; things go wrong. But one of my favorite short stories when I was growing up was the short "Happy Life of Francis Mccomber," which is a Hemingway story about a sort of a middle-aged, well-to-do but very bored New Yorker who comes with his wife to safari in Africa, and he's kind of a wimp. And the safari guide, is this manly man who seduces his wife and embarrasses him. And there is a moment at the end of the short story where he is attacked by a lion, and he mans up to it and he shoots the lion, something he probably couldn't have done if he hadn't taken this journey. And he, for a few seconds, feels this exultation, the sort of apotheosis of joy that comes from taking that risk. And that is the calculus. You do these things and you can find meaning and joy and happiness and delight in measures that are not otherwise available. But there is risk, and you could injure yourself or worse as a result of it. But at the end of the day, it's probably worth it. My point being, to answer your question in the long way, is that everybody has that measuring stick, and for some it might be venturing into a park and camping out for the first time in their life, and they're uncomfortable with that concept. But as soon as they're out there and they see the stars for the first time, they recognize that this is something magical and different and transformational. And for others, it may be you have to climb 14 of the 8,000 meter summits without oxygen in order to get that personal entitlement. But it's a huge slider that's personal to every individual, as long as they take that step and go out there. So the first part of your question was, yes, this is available to everybody. It's never going to go away. Secondly, if you're referring to me, yes, I have an infinite bucket list of things that I would like to see and do that I think will create that it's kind of an eternal quest to child again. When you are making discoveries for the first time that just widen your eyes and make you go, wow. When you turn around a corner as a young person and you see something you never imagined existed, and it just blows your mind. That kind of experience for many, if not most adults, becomes something of their past. But if you continue on this journey, this quest to sort of recapture that notion of wonder, wonder is a key operative word there, I think, then it is there to be had. For me, there are many destinations that I would like to see and many activities I'd like to try. And I'll do as many as I can, as long as I can.
There you go. So this opens up two more points of curiosity for me as you perhaps take a lens looking back. I mean, you were on the river in Pakistan, the river in Ethiopia. Was perhaps it was one of those, but perhaps another location where in the moment you were just perhaps stopped in your tracks with, oh wow. What comes to mind?
Well, there are certainly many. And it continues to this day. I will.
That was the other question, by the way.
Yeah. I was in Namibia over Thanksgiving and got stranded because Omicron showed up while I was there, and they locked down Southern Africa. But it was the best thing to be stranded in Southern Africa for a couple of weeks. But in Namibia, we went to an area called Damaraland, and we went out in search of what they call the Pygmy elephants, the desert elephants that only exist in this one small area of the world. I had never seen them before. And to find them riding over a ridge in the safari vehicle and then seeing a herd of these very unique animals who have adapted to one of the harshest environments was a thrill. And and I had my son with me, and he was equally thrilled. I like those sorts of things. And I've had that feeling, I think, many, many, many times, even from our first trips on the Omo River in Ethiopia. I remember seeing this 1,000-foot waterfall spilling into the river with a likelihood that nobody had ever recorded this waterfall, had seen it, and climbed to the top of it and gazed down at the Omo Valley, which is a valley that had no history of any explorer penetration up to that point. And just looking around and seeing that vast, untouched wilderness was a sort of an inestimable. And I remember I broke out singing, and I was just so in that moment and so joyful. It called for song. So
are you willing to share what song you were singing?
I've got the whole world
okay
in my hands. For some reason, I don't know why that came to me, but
all right. Well, I won't ask you to sing it now, but I can I can provide a link to a YouTube video.
Yeah.
You mentioned your son was with you in Namibia. And by the way, if memory serves me, isn't it Namibia where the desert literally goes right to the ocean?
Yes, it does. The Skeleton Coast.
Okay.
It's quite spectacular. It's one of the most treacherous coasts, I think, in the world. And before there was a Suez Canal, all the ships who wanted to trade with the East would go down to the tip of Southern Africa and make that perilous passage. But the worst part of that passage is off Namibia. And many, many ships didn't make it, and quite a few have washed up on shore. And they are skeletons of human history there. So you can visit them or fly over them and see something that's pretty extraordinary.
Oh wow! I am a follower on a couple of Facebook, Instagram pages. A lot of it is Southern Africa with the safaris, the lions, and such. But just in my bucket list, and I'm thinking after chatting with you, there shouldn't even be a bucket list. There should be a checklist of when you're going somewhere. But getting to Africa, and by the way, I'm a huge fan of coffee, which my listeners know.
Yeah.
So which brings me to another question I want to ask, but just the idea of being in these countries, enjoying their local coffee and just enjoying the sight. I'm a big sunrise person. I love the quiet of the morning, sunrise, cup of coffee, and I'm a happy guy for the entire day.
Wow. That's great.
But I think the opportunity to get out there and explore, Africa and the various countries, it's wonderful. And with your son and other members of your close and perhaps extended family, have they embraced the love of adventure that you have been pursuing your life, for that matter?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. That's a nice question. Oh, first of all, I do want to mention that coffee comes from Ethiopia. That's
Of
its
course.
original source. So,
I have some right here. It's ready to get roasted.
there you go. There you go. The Abyssinian bean.
Yeah.
So yes. So my wife, Laura, is with the BBC World Service. And so she's an itinerant traveler, loves to travel. And so we've been able to combine forces on many things where we'll both undertake something and she'll do something for the BBC. We were in Rwanda with the mountain gorillas. We took Daryl Hannah to Rwanda on an expedition. And
Lucky you.
I know. And we were both able to interview the president of Rwanda, she for the BBC, and then my for an article. So it all worked in concert, and that's something we try to achieve. I have two sons. They both love to the younger one. I had a series on PBS for a number of years, and the younger one, Jasper, went with me on all of the shoots, as did my wife, Laura. So he's 14. He's been to 50 countries at this point.
Oh, wow. I mean, the stories, I mean, this is where I think it's so important, the experiences versus the trinkets. I mean, or toys, let's say toys. Trinkets can be nice if they have meaning and are important to you, but versus the toys. And
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. And by the way, Rwanda is my favorite source for coffee. I love African coffee, but Rwanda is definitely my favorite.
Yes, the Highlands coffee there. It's very good. Yeah.
When you and your friend partner started Sobek, how has that work evolved over the years, and what is its presence today for folks who are into the travel space?
Well, I would say that in our youthful exuberance, we were mostly excited about the sort of adrenaline that would flow when you did a first descent of a river and ran rapids and encountered wildlife, et cetera, et cetera. And our first offerings were down these wild rivers that were unlike anything in the United States. So they were multidimensional and in the cultures they offered, the flora and the fauna, et cetera, et cetera. But as time went on, I think as humans, we hopefully evolved so that we found a deeper appreciation and just as much meaning and joy in all the different elements that come, not just with river travel, which is extraordinary because it will get you through so many different environments and into places that are inaccessible in any other way, but also travel as a whole, is something where you step forward and lean into an experience and make encounters that are different and challenge you, and you learn from these, and you start to begin to see the interconnectedness of all things, which is a really sort of profound awareness. And when you get that, so anyway, I don't know if that answers your question. But.
No, I think the fact that it's still around. I mean, it's gone through its evolution from the original idea into MT Sobek today. And of course, we're going to provide backlinks for our listeners because I'm excited to kind of go back and look at these adventures. And it's like, okay, right now, my life is about podcasting and outdoor adventure. I'm thinking I literally can take my podcast equipment, go anywhere and interview people, and I can go on an adventure. So I love that idea.
I was going to say, MT Sobek, after all these years, still specializes in doing first, which has always been a hallmark. It was originally first descents of rivers. And I think the company has done well over 100 first descents. But it's been geographical for us a lot in the last 20 years or so. I took the first American group to North Korea and the first group to Saudi Arabia and Iran. And in Myanmar, we took the first group to Cuba back in 1979 and the first trip to Antarctica back in 78, I think it was. And I led the first American trip to communist China. And that was in 1977 or something, before rapprochement. And I led a trip to the first American trip to Libya. So that's not just a hallmark, it's a signature, and it's something that gets everybody in the company excited, especially me, and the people who are part of our community, who like to travel with us. They always excited about what's next and where we're going to go and what we hope to open up.
Well, there's something really energizing about knowing that you're going to be part of the first, I think.
It is. Yeah. So we're
Now,
planning a bunch of them right now.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. And we're definitely going to share some of that on our show notes. And let's talk a little bit about Steller now. And I love the fact you have this app where, as I understand it, travelers who are out, wherever they're out, can begin to collect, produce or read other stories.
Yes. Yeah. So Steller, which stands for storyteller, is a platform where anybody can go in and create a story about their journey or their experience. It's all about travel, and it's all multimedia. So you can do video, you can do stills. Everything is automatically geotagged, so you can, as a user, you can find out where a story was created. There's text, there's graphics, there's sound, there's music, there's anything you want to create an everlasting story about what you've seen and done, touched and learned. So it's taken off in the last few years. It's now, we think, the largest travel storytelling platform there is, and virtually every destination you can think of is in there. If you just search, you'll find stories on it. Most of it is user generated, but we also have a professional team that will create against various contracts we have with tourism boards and tour companies, et cetera. And then we also have sort of a select group of creator ambassadors, influencers that we deploy for various campaigns. So we just came back from Georgia, the country of Georgia, where we did a whole ski edition on the Caucasus Mountains, and it's spectacular stuff that's appearing in the app. And we just finished another campaign with Ireland, and we send these influencers all over the world, and we pay them, and they create great content, and we distribute it, and it's great. It has no advertising, so it's not like Instagram or Facebook where it's obnoxious. All the content is evergreen; it never goes away, and we encourage outward going links. Many of the other platforms are closed gardens, but yeah, it's a pretty cool project, and I'm having a lot of fun doing it.
Oh, it sounds interesting. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, as I go out and explore and interview others remotely now for the Outdoor Adventure series, that perhaps it's a good opportunity to try to contribute or help others learn about how they could contribute as well.
Yes.
In your statements a few minutes ago, these places that you have visited, a lot of these countries, Myanmar, Iran, Libya, North Korea, heaven knows, North Korea, there's a huge political element to some of this. How do you navigate the politics while still being true to your vision, values?
Well, yeah, that's an extremely good question, because there is a philosophy that if a government or a culture is not humanistic in the way that we define human rights, et cetera, that we should not cater or encourage or in any way support their conduct through. And so that group of philosophers, if you want to call them that, or that philosophy, which is endorsed by many, many, many people, would like to continue to boycott a place like North Korea for what it does, or China because of the Uyghurs, or any other place in the world that has well-known human rights issues. My philosophy has always been, and I've been in many discussions and arguments and knockdowns with others on this. My philosophy, my take has always been that it is better to go to a place, no matter its current policies, and have a one-to-one interaction with the people who are living there so that they can understand who we are and we can get a better understanding of who they are and connect the humanity between the two and the commonalities between the two, and then put a little chip in the wall by making that can. And I fully believe that it works. Sometimes it's a very slow process, but it's much better than a boycott or turning your head the other way or shaming somebody, because most of these changes happen from the bottom up. And if the people begin to perceive that they have a system that is radically unfair and that we are not the enemy, that we actually are partners in humanity, it can affect the change. North Korea is a great example. I got a lot of flack for leading a group of Americans to North Korea because the money clearly goes to the government. Why support a government that's as heinous as North Korea? But, we got there. We spent a couple of weeks touring around. We met a lot of people in all stations in life. And every encounter was a very positive one. And we got to talk to and know and share meals with a lot of people who had perceptions about us that were completely false. They had been fed propaganda since the end of the Korean War that America, which has a large presence in South Korea with military presence, that America is obsessed with destroying North Korea, and that we are all evil masterminds, and every waking moment of every day we're conspiring as to how to destroy North Korea. And they're brought up that way, they're taught that in schools. Posters are everywhere about how awful Americans are. And when they encountered us and we got to talk to them and laugh with them, they recognized that all of this that they were fed for so long really wasn't truthful, that we're not all ogres. And that little bit of connective tissue, I think, begins to make a difference. And I would predict that the Kim family, who rule the country, will not be here in another generation, because the leakage from tourism and from the borders, et cetera, of what life is really like in a different part of the world is becoming larger all the time. And there's more and more information that's seeping in. And I think that we will see better North Korea, maybe in our lifetimes. And I think in some small way, travel contributes to that. I think travel changes things for the better ultimately.
Sure. Another question I have, and I know I want to be respectful of your time today. Could you chat a little bit about the Center for Responsible Travel? And I'm curious, just given the nature of what's going on in life right now, we've got still the COVID has its grip on us. We've got climate change all around us. How is the Center for Responsible Travel playing a role in navigating some of what I would imagine are very thorny issues?
Yes, there are many thorny issues that come with travel. I think in the great logbook of life, travel has some negative ledger pieces, but ultimately the column that's positive is much, much greater, because when people travel, they understand. They have a greater understanding and a great appreciation for everything. CREST is the Center for Responsible Travel. I'm on their board, have been for some time. It's a Washington, D.C. based organization that tries to influence policy with not only travelers so that they travel with an awareness, but also with purveyors of travel. And that's tour outfitters, travel agents, cruise ships. And whenever there is a blotch, I think, in the tourism map that's caused by people in the travel space, CREST is an advocate for awareness and improvement, change, evolution, all those things. Some of the policies, because it's a lobbyist organization or two, have to do with Washington politics and trying to influence, how we consider travel and how we treat it as a government. But a lot of it is private sector direct. Over tourism has been a big issue for a long time leading up to 2020. and that temporarily self-corrected, but it looks like it's going to be a plague again. So they're trying to get tour operators and host destinations to consider alternatives so that overcrowding doesn't kill the golden goose. And climate change is a very big initiative with Crest, and they're trying to help tour operators come up with ways, because travel in itself, when you talk about the negative side of the ledger, getting on a plane contributes to global climate change. So you have to weigh what are the benefits of travel as against what are the negative effects of travel in this global issue that we're all wrestling with. So they're working with airlines, trying to come up with alternative fuel issues. They're trying with carbon offset companies, and impact travel is another one of their pillars. And that's trying to convince both tour operators and travelers that when they travel, they can make positive impacts. And part of that can be contributing to local causes or vendors or cultures or people as you travel, and bringing their message, bringing their issues back to a wider audience, and being actively engaged with the issues that are unveiled as you travel, and making a positive impact through your footprints.
Richard, before we kind of close down our conversation today, if you had to share with our listeners what we would call on the show an insight to go, something that you would like to leave with them, a quote. I mean, heaven knows you've got all the books, the articles, and points of view, the work between Crest, the Steller, MT Sobek. What would you want to leave our listeners with, just given your experience and the things that you've done and accomplished, to get them as energized about travel and leaning in, perhaps doing something that maybe takes you out of your comfort zone? What would you like to share?
There are endless sort of quotes from.
It's a loaded question. I know.
Yeah, from explorers, past and present, and literary ponderers who look at travel and try to consider it in a way that can be expressed in a sentence or two. But it's, at the end of the day, I think it's all about movement. So, well, let me add to that. I think it's movement, it's curiosity, and it's being receptive to wonder or seeking wonder. So nothing happens if you don't move. You can, if you want to be safe, you can keep your ship in port forever and you avoid all the storms. But if you would like to make discoveries, personal and beyond, it requires movement. It requires an outward bound sensibility. And I think many of us, many people I know, many people in my extended family get to a point where they find extreme comfort in sort of cushioning themselves inside of a safe place. But, they never really experience the real wonder that you can if you're willing to open that door and walk out of it and try something different and new. And curiosity is a huge element of that, because if you are curious, everything you see and do and touch and experience will inform you in ways that are unexpected. I always like John McPhee as a writer, because he could delve so deeply into any possible subject and come back with 100,000 words on it. Even then, he will have scratched the surface. His very first book was on oranges. So an enormous treatise on everything about oranges. So, and then he did a whole book on the birch bark canoe. And that's true. I mean, you can dive deep into anything and make discovery after discovery. And also you begin to see how the puzzle pieces fit together. And the eureka moment when you finish a jigsaw puzzle, yay, yippee, I did it. I can see the image. And that happens in life as well, if you're willing to explore and go out, because you will be receiving bits of information about how everything works. And nobody will ever see the complete puzzle. It's infinitely complex. But you begin to see patterns, and you begin to see the commonalities, and you begin to see a picture. And it's wondrous and delightful when that happens. And it can only happen if you move.
I think you did a fantastic job as a kind of a last moment gotcha question for you. So I truly thank you for that. That was fantastic.
Great. Well,
Richard, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and really the kind of the breadth of your work, where are the best places we should be sending them?
well, I think the three organizations with which I am most closely associated at this point would be MT Sobek, which is mtsobek.com, Steller, Steller, stellar.co, and CREST, which is the Center for Responsible Travel. And it's an org. You can go to my website, richardbanks.com, and there's a fair amount of material on there. I don't work on that very much. So, but it's got some background material.
Okay.
So,
and I know you have a presence on Facebook and on Instagram, and of course, we will provide the backlinks to the sites, social sites, as well as to CREST, Steller, and MT Sobek. Richard, it has been a pleasure and honor to have you join me on the podcast. Just, I know we literally have tipped the surface of what has been really just a phenomenal career, and talk about just the happenstance of attending a meeting of canoe enthusiasts going down the Potomac,
Colorado.
and how this turned into a career where you're living your best life and full of passion and sharing that with fellow adventure seekers all over the world. And it's just been a great pleasure. And for our listeners, I had the opportunity to meet Richard via the Outdoor Writers Association of America. Our executive director, Ches Chezik, had shared some information regarding the Explorers Web naming of the 100 great explorers for the last 100 years. And being the opportunistic podcaster that I am, I reached out to Richard right away. I said, "Hey, Richard, would you like to be on my podcast?" And so, folks, here he is. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to meeting you at the annual meeting in Casper as well.
Well, Howard, that should be fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I'm going to do a quick sign off, and then we'll have a final chat. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
Okay, folks, we hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series. Really just adventure enthusiast, explorer, journalist, communicator, director, writer, you name it. Richard has been doing it in the remote corners of the globe. And I kind of think back to growing up is Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom and the stacks of National Geographic magazine that ended up in people's garages. And I remember being on airplanes when I was traveling for work with my my edition of Outside magazine, and just really the way that the internet and the podcasting, for that matter, has made travel and adventure so accessible to us. And then here's Richard being named one of the 100 great explorers in the last 100 years. And we're going to provide a link to that. But just think about the people whose paths preceded Richard, and now the path that Richard has been on, and the future explorers that are going to be marching forward, whether it's here on Earth or perhaps out into the cosmos. Who knows? But just full of possibility. So, folks, definitely do check out the sites to MT Sobek, to Steller, and to CREST. We'll have those backlinks, as well as to Richard's website, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find this episode on the OutdoorAdventureSeries.com. We also have our Facebook page, Outdoor Adventure Series, and we're also on the major podcasting platforms: Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, and Audible, and the other secondary podcast directories. Wherever you consume this episode, please let us know via your comments. And of course, like us, share the episode with a friend. Reach out and learn more about the organizations that we're going to share with you on the show notes. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you again on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.